any Democratic elected official, you know, supporting that
Well, let
in
me
any
tell you,
form.
Robert,
You know, I really can't.
the
That's
cut to the homeless services is devastating.
I can't see it.
Yes, it
is
is.
a huge cut. And Gray needs to be, on the one hand, though, he needs to be commended to men having the guts to raise taxes. On the other hand, it doesn't fund, you know, it cuts homeless services dramatically. So I'm
You know,
with
Mr.
you
Wells,
that
I mean-
this is
I mean-
hard.
I mean, to raise taxes on people, that was a no-brainer. That's something that has to be done. We all have to pay our fair share.
The Kwame Brown
Yes,
is
sir.
opposed to it, the chair. Jack Evans is opposed to it. We've got David Catania opposed to it. And I don't know how many other people opposed to it. You may call it a no-brainer, but we're in a fight.
You can look at it two ways. I mean, for me, you know what I'm saying, I just look at it in common sense, you know what I'm saying? Either you're gonna allow people to stay on the streets and die, or you're gonna say, okay, we're gonna have a city government, you know what I'm saying, we're all gonna take a hit. You know what I'm saying? You're gonna say, okay, I'm a paid city official, you know what I'm saying, I'm gonna have to take a cut in the pay that I get.
Now,
You
we
should
took
start-
a
you
cut.
should start
We
at
did
the-
take a cut in our pay.
You should start at the top and then you work your way down. I
We
mean,
took a cut in pay.
What
We took
percent?
and it should
4
work its way
furlough
up.
days.
Huh.
So that we did, and we haven't taken a raise in 3 years, which is not any comfort, but we did not, we took a cut in pay.
it has to, you know, start with the mayor and it has to work its way on down to all city employees. I mean, that's just the nature of where we at right now.
With the
And that's
city,
what's fair.
all the employees, by working, you know, by not being paid for 4 days, have taken a cut. Now, there may be
How
more,
much revenue did they bring?
about 5 million, between $4 and $5 million. Every-
Compare that to $130 million cut.
Well,
It's not a whole
you're
lot.
not gonna balance the budget on having your employees not come to work. So, when you take a furlough day, they're not working. So the degree to which we take the cuts and by sending people home will, you know, there's a limit to that. And it's not a stable way, you know, it's not a sustainable way to balance a budget.
Right.
Now, again, Vince Gray proposed raising taxes when he never did that in his 4 years as chair. And you've got a new chair who says no. So, we're in a fight with what we currently got. But what have you heard from the chair of the committee, Mr. Graham?
Well, we didn't get a chance to talk to Ms. Graham. We spoke with one of his Latino outreach workers, director.
She was very
outreach
positive,
worker.
though.
Yeah, she was positive. What did
And,
you say?
you know, I've testified in front of Mr. Graham and Mr. Brown concerning, you know, on round table on housing and, you know, I mean.
So is Graham for in tax increase?
I mean,
Graham will support the tax increase. The question is where does it go? Like, does it go to help build back homeless services? Or does it go to drug treatment programs? Where does it go? And so,
And the thing about these other cuts too is that, you know, that we have here, you know, 60% of the cuts are to helping human services, 25% of the budget. But also, these are all really safety net programs. You cut ERAP, that just means
excuse me,
more
excuse
homeless
me,
families.
Can you repeat that? Well, I've been hearing conflict, you know what I'm saying, as far as human services in its programs. Is it 40% of the budget, of DC whole budget?
No, I
So is it
can answer your question
25%
for you. I can answer your
or-
question for you.
I mean,
DC's budget, not counting federal money, is $6.3 billion a year. Human services is $1.5 billion, or about 1/4 of that. And so, with human services being 1/4 of the budget, they're taking 2/3 of the cuts. So the cuts total $190 million, and $130 million is coming from human services. And so their part of the
that
budget
within
is one.
itself is not fair.
So it's disproportionate.
well, you know, as you know, and I know what it feels like to be in Mr. Graham's shoes, obviously. I fought off a lot of budget cuts. And I had people who should have been our friends in this building very upset that I would not, you know, that I was able to fight off some of these budget cuts. And then, in our last budget, I tried to raise revenue through taxes so that we would be building into this year to make less cuts, because we're putting off some of the cuts into this year. So we had to cut more this year than we would have but for the fact that we didn't raise any new revenue. Now, the mayor had his reasons, so he waited till this time to raise revenue. But the tide has turned inside this building. Let me tell you, there is people that we believed would fight for the least of us, and that's why they're here, who say, you know, Tommy, we just did not cut enough out of human services. And so the Washington Post is giving them cover to say, you've got to cut more, not restore.
Well, you know what?
So we need your help.
Yeah.
What that brings to mind, because I left a meeting early this morning over at Charlton U for the Lead Clinic for the Homeless, and we were talking about the fact that there's a $20 million budget gap in human services for fiscal 12. You know, because they're trying to figure out how they're going to mitigate all these budget cuts, and they figured out some of it, but they still have $20 million that they can't account for. You know, that in a budget gap that they're trying to fill, and homeless services comprises about $60 million a year out of the human services budget, and so about 1/3 of their budget is going to, you know, still hasn't been made up for 2012, and so what it's looking like is that we're going to have to go down to just bare minimum of what DC has to do by law, which is, by law, DC government only has to provide shelter if it's 32 and below, or 95 and above, and during the interim, when it's between 33 and 94, rain or shine, there's no legal mandate for them to create shelter for you, and we kind of feel like that's where it's going, and that as of April 1st next year is when we're going to see.
Eric, I believe that the hardest, deepest cut this time is into homeless services.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly.
I think you're right. I think these other things you have in here are cut to different degrees, but the services where they were really eviscerated will be in the non-hypothermia season of homeless services.
But at the same time, like, emergency rental assistance program, the amount it's being cut means 2,000 families losing their homes. You can only get emergency rental assistance if you have an eviction letter. And it's a one-time payment to keep people in their homes. So, you know, you're right, that's the biggest cut. At the same time, when you're cutting, that doesn't make sense to cut URAP or fine, you know, $2 million
And-
to keep 2,000 people in their homes.
And you know, I got
I agree.
So,
I got-
it's, you know, like penny wise, what do they say, penny
I
wise,
agree.
pound.
Now, there's a lot, you know, I don't know if it can be used for this. You can do the research, but there's been a substantial increase of money going to the Housing Production Trust Fund.
Which is
Increase?
taken for local rent supplement program right now in the mayor's budget, so that's another huge issue.
I
There's not
mean-
gonna be any money in the trust fund. for
Well,
actual-
what I'm wondering is, I mean, we've got an adjustment in this fiscal year of $9 million.
It's all, I mean.
No,
yeah, this is a
what
great
was in
issue.
front of
Well-
us yesterday was to send it into those new projects.
Well, I mean, the
Do
thing
you
is.
want that for E ERAP?
No, we want money to stay in the trust fund.
I-
for the trust
actually,
fund. The trust fund has a huge pipeline, even with this new infusion. This year, it might clear out the trust fund, but currently, I mean, that would mean no production or preservation.
Okay.
Actually,
So
I-
that was one source of new revenue that we had not seen
Yeah,
for
but
a
it's not,
while.
Okay,
you know,
okay.
new, and the mayor's budget is talking about cutting local rent supplements item and taking it from the trust fund. The trust fund too is a revolving fund right now, you know, tenant associations, for example, get a loan, housing producers get a loan and then pay
okay.
it back.
I'm just wondering.
Okay, but actually,
There was $9 million at least in new spending proposed to the council, and I was asking, just wondering if you
Yeah, I don't
wanted
think
it
it's
for
actually
ERAP.
new though, I think it's stuff that's currently in the pipeline. and
Those
has been for a
things
while.
are in the pipeline, but they haven't started.
Some of them started,
But-
but yeah.
okay, so
Well, I saw the list, and each one said pending closure.
I mean, the other thing is what we're really concerned about is tenant purchases as well, which have like a very specific timeline. Buildings come up for sale, If that money's not there in the trust fund, then they completely miss that opportunity. And that really is one of the most affordable ways to get affordable housing.
Okay.
You know, it's already there, you can preserve it. Otherwise, you build new housing, it's gonna cost, what, 5 times as much to build new housing as actually
Well, I
preserve.
think that the pinch we're in is that the mayor has stepped out there and said, I'll raise taxes.
Yeah.
There's people in the building that are fighting it tooth and nail, and they have the Washington Post on their side.
Yeah.
It's gonna be a hard argument to make to say, no, raise them more, because the mayor won't support it. So I don't know how you win that one. He won't, but what I'm doing is I'm gonna try it, I've gotta make up a $13.5 million gap on Metro. And so I'm gonna go try to find that money, and raise it through not raising taxes, but looking at the nexus between how many cars we have in the city and how much people are encouraged to drive into the city versus take mass transportation, put a monetary value to that, and ask to try to help support Metro.
I actually think
I've heard that DC is owed like million in unpaid parking tickets. And so, I mean, to
I'm
try.
going after that to help pay for Metro.
Right.
You're exactly right.
Okay, but-
Robert.
In the
You
parking
got it.
garage.
Actually, what I want to say is kind of piggyback on what Farah was saying, you know, about the ERAP, because yesterday I was at the ICH meeting and I heard Fred Swan from Human Services say that the city spends $1 million a month on the family shelter over at DC General, which houses 150 families, and he was saying that some people want to make that a year-round shelter, which would cost $12 million a year. And so I did some math. You know, you got 150 families in that shelter for $12 million a year. That comes out to $80,000 a family. You don't pay that much for rent. It's actually more cost effective to take that
Okay.
money and put it into
But
ERAP.
if you do that, are you willing to close the shelter?
Are you willing to close the shelter?
I mean, if you're
If
gonna
you-
cash out the shelter dollars, are you willing to close the shelter? Because how do you run it with nothing?
Right.
So if you
yeah,
say
so what
transfer the money to ERAP,
Right.
That's only $2 million.
then you have to close the shelter.
yeah, or you can transfer part of it to ERAP anyway.
Then you have to close part of the shelter.
Yeah. So
Better
what I'm thinking is that, you know, if you figure that on the high end that you pay $2,000 a month for a unit, which you probably aren't going to pay quite that much if you're being in the city. You pay about $1,250, right? But even so, if you overestimate $2,000 a month, $24,000 a year, then
Well, Eric,
$12 million will house 500
but
families. So
are you willing
if
to
you take
close
half
the
of that,
shelter?
am I willing to close the
I
shelter?
don't know what, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I'm not going.
Yeah, I'll be willing to.
I'm telling you, I'm just really, I don't know the numbers, but I do know people. And, it seems to me it looks like they're trying to close the shelters anyhow. Little by little, every one of the shelters are closing. We only have several stable shelters right now. DC General, John Young, 2nd and D. Those are the 3 major ones. And then we have the private shelter at Industry Roads. That's it. So it seems to me that all those people at DC General, I hear what you're saying numbers wise, but you don't want to close the shelters.
Right.
Because
Yeah.
everybody is going suffering now
Yeah.
on all levels. And everybody has the tendency to tomorrow get a pig slip and lose their job. And everybody don't have family and friends to depend on. So
Right.
they need someplace to go.
Right.
So closing, maxing out, cashing out, whatever
Right.
words you want to use, should not ever be on the table.
Right.
But these communities are trying to close out these shelters and are trying to move the people out of these communities. And where else they're going to go?
Yeah, but
And, you know, I am born and raised in D.C. I pay tax in the city, and all that stuff. And I spent all of my adult life actually in Maryland and just coming back in. So, and I lived pretty good in Maryland. And I'm astonished at how high the rent is here. So it's not even an option of closing shelter. It should never be an option. But at the same time, how do we help the people who are actually staying there to get into their own place?